Unfortunately, it got stuck in a bystander and I had to remove the bystander to hit the target behind it. It's okay. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today, we're going to be talking about the Primary Arms Classic 1:4x LPVO. But before we get into the video, if you'd like to like, share, and subscribe, as all that sort of stuff is free and does help me out quite a bit, go ahead and do that. You can also comment literally anything down below. Now, on top of that, there's Subscribestar, which is basically a pro to a Patreon, and on top of that, there's my website where there could, in theory, be something in stock. Now, full disclosure on the Primary Arms 1:4x LPVO, or their Classic Series LPVO, is that I paid my own money for this. However, I am a dealer for Primary Arms, so I do get a pretty hefty discount on a lot of their optics. So while I did pay my own money for this, they did not send this out. I am not working with them in any way, shape, or form. I did get it at a reduced price. So the reason that I'm reviewing the PA 1:4 is that I've been getting a lot of questions on them. You can usually find these for around $120 to $150, which makes them kind of the cheapest LPVO from a major brand name on the market. And of course, with that diminutive price tag for at least a wide portion of my audience, it becomes a very interesting optic. So let's go ahead and get into some of the boring specifications on the PA 1:4. So starting out, it is of course a 1:4 by 24 millimeter objective lens. Is very standard for this 30 millimeter main tube. It is 6061 hard coat anodized in a very nice black anodization, which has held up quite well throughout the testing. We have a very good eye relief of about 3.5 to 6 or 7 inches on 1x, though of course on 4x it does tighten up a little bit to right around that 3.5 inch range, which is still very good. Now we have an illuminated reticle. However, the reticle itself is just a duplex reticle with a center. I believe it's a 1 MOA dot, could be a 2 MOA dot. It does illuminate bright enough to see during the day. Though most of the time you're not going to need it, as the center dot is plenty big enough just to use as if it was a red dot, of course just a black dot. Now the scope itself is a little bigger than you might think. It is over 11 inches long. I believe it's 11.1 inches long, though the weight is very low at 16.7, so it's a very nice lightweight package. Has a 180-degree throw on the magnification ring, a rear diopter of course for adjusting the reticle to your eye. It does have capped windage and elevation, and the windage turret has a space for an extra battery in the top. Other than that, it's fairly basic. It's water and fog proof, nitrogen purged, all that sort of good stuff, and of course comes with Primary Arms lifetime guarantee. So now I've had this optic for several months. It's been mounted on 4 or 5 different guns. I believe we used it a little bit on the Criterion 12.5, that custom build. Then we had it a little bit on that Bear Creek Arsenal 7.62x39 side charger, and then it's been sitting on this 14.5 Superlative Arms piston for the last couple weeks or so. In terms of total round count, I want to say we've done a couple hundred just standard 5.56 DI, a couple hundred 7.62x39, and then 500 or 600 on this DI, or sorry, this piston 5.56. So overall round count is a little bit over 1,000 rounds over the last couple months, and it's held up extremely well. The entire time I've been using it in this Hiram scope mount, although this is like kind of a basic, you know, Amazon special or eBay special scope mount. A lot of really budget optics companies are using it. I think Monstrum has a identical scope mount, so it's kind of just one of those things that some company is mass producing overseas and then importing them, and people are slapping their own brand name on. In terms of the mount itself though, it does quite well. It has 3 very large cross bolts and integrated recoil lugs on the bottom, so a lot of clamping pressure over a large surface area is a good sign, and a very standard 4 set screw per ring. On top, everything works quite well. Now, in terms of the eye relief and eye box, as we mentioned before, it's very good. If you've played around with a lot of 1:4s versus 1:6s, 1:8s, or 1:10s, you'll notice that the 1:4s tend to be a lot more forgiving at each of their lower magnification ranges than something with higher magnification. So at 1x, of course, it starts at around 3.5 inches, but the eye relief, you know, you can stretch it out quite a bit and you can still make shots just like this, no problem. So really the optimal eye relief at 1x is anywhere from like 3 to 10 inches and you're going to be just fine. And on top of that, the eye box itself is pretty darn good. It's very forgiving. It's not tight whatsoever at 1x. Now when you flip it all the way over, it's a fairly short throw, little knob, not any sort of extended throw lever, but at this price point you can't really complain. at 4x, the eye box, of course, does tighten up, and the eye relief itself also tightens up. Overall, though, for an LPVO, or something that's going to be used probably most of the time at a lower magnification, the eye box eye relief is very, very usable. It's very easy to take shots in weird positions that you may not normally find yourself in, because the eye box and eye relief is very good. Is it as good as a red dot? No, of course not, but it is still very good for just about any LPVO on the market, let alone one so cheap. Now, the eye box, eye relief, all that sort of stuff is good. However, the field of view on the optic, now I couldn't find exact numbers on their website, but it seems a little bit diminutive to me. Honestly, to me, at 1x, it seems something like 90 to 100 feet, something in that range. I would be very surprised if it was higher than that. It does give you quite a bit of that scope shadow effect, or not scope shadow effect, where you have basically a huge black ring outside of the image itself, whereas a lot of other nicer LPVOs, that outer, the scope itself will kind of disappear when you're looking through it on 1x. This does not do that. So I believe the field of view is anywhere between, again, 90 and 100 feet, though I couldn't find correct definitive numbers on what it actually is, but it does seem somewhat small and is a lot smaller than some other nicer LPVOs that I've tested. So not really a problem at 1x. It is, again, preferable to have more field of view, but in this case, it's not that bad. Now, the main problem with a diminutive field of view is when you start cranking up on the magnification. Now, this one here only goes to 4x, of course, and at 4x, I believe this is something, you know, again, like 20, 25 feet at 4x. Now that is similar to a lot of other LPOs 6x. So let's say the SIG MSR behind me, I don't know if you guys can see it back there, the SIG MSR 1 to 6, that has a field of view at 1x of 124, which is excellent. It's one towards the top end of field of views on LPVOs, and that at 6x has more field of view than this optic does at 4x, which means that when you're cranked up at any of those magnifications in between, you see a lot more of that magnified image than you do with the primary arms 1 to 4x. Now, that scope is also twice the money, and in some cases close to twice the performance. So again, while it probably won't be that big of a deal to most people, it is still quite small and should be noted. So now when talking about all of that, we also need to take into account the reticle itself. Now the reticle itself, as you mentioned before, is a very simple duplex reticle with a center 2 MOA dot. I believe it's 2 MOA. It could be 1 to 2 to 3 MOA, something in there, but to me it appears to be a 2 MOA dot, which is plenty precise for a 1 to 4x. That means that you get a very quick, very fast optic to use up close. A 2 MOA dot as an aiming point is very standard. You know, any red dot on the market is basically going to have a 2 MOA center dot. So if you're used to shooting a red dot, this is going to be very close to that, and of course doesn't require daylight bright illumination to do that. Now, the nice thing about this optic is that while the field of view is fairly diminutive, the image that you're seeing is very flat and very natural looking, so you don't get a lot of warping or fisheye effect that you would get on other, say, higher field of view LPVOs. So while it is a smaller field of view, it is flat, it is natural looking. So while you are shredding targets up close, it's not going to be a jarring difference between what you're seeing through the glass and what's actually out there and getting seen in your periphery. So overall, the reticle works very well for its intended purpose, especially on a 1 to 4. This is not a long-range precision scope, so a very simple duplex reticle is going to get you out to 400 yards, no problems, because of course you can kind of use the reticle itself to hold a little bit, and with 5.56 on a 14.5, there's not really all that much drop out to 400 yards. Now, I do want to say, before we go any further, I did take this optic out to 450 with a 7.62 by 39. It was very easy at 300, decently easy at 400, and then 450 and 500. It was basically like somewhere between 10 and 20% chance of actually hitting the target. And again, with 7.62 by 39, it was dropping quite a bit. And all we're doing is using Kentucky windage to get out that far, because again, this does not have a BDC. This is literally just a duplex reticle with a center dot.
That's incredible.
All of that taken into consideration, we also need to talk about the glass quality itself. And I'm pleasantly surprised to say that the glass quality is just fine. It's probably a combination of a fact that it has a very simple architecture. It's a very lightweight, so there's probably not all that much cheap glass in here. So when you keep stacking more and more cheap Chinese glass with cheap Chinese coatings over top of each other, you're not going to get a very good overall image. And because it's not dealing with a huge field of view, I think it kind of lends itself to having a little bit better glass quality than some of the other more expensive optics on the market that are, of course, using a lot more glass to achieve that greater magnification, greater field of view, and so on. So the glass quality, while it is nothing special by any means, it's certainly not going to compete with even the Vortex PST, this is like the first true step up in glass quality, because it is made in the Philippines versus China, and China, generally speaking, has the lowest tiered glass, though again, their glass is getting better very, very, very quickly. So while I will say that this is still towards the bottom of the stack in terms of all LPVOs, for Chinese glass LPVOs, it's just fine. The clarity is there. Edge to edge looks very good. Light transmission is fine. Not great, but fine. And so using this even at extended distances, of course, if it had a BDC, it would be much more usable at extended distances, but using it at any intermediate distance is no problem whatsoever. It was more than clear enough on any given day in any conditions that I've shot it with. So the glass quality I'm actually fairly happy for, especially with the price. Now, all that being said, we kind of need to talk about its durability. Again, it's been mounted in this fairly cheap mount. I believe the 3 cross bolts are torqued to 45 inch-pounds, which is pretty good. They are sizable cross bolts, which I like, so I was able to get away with 45 inch-pounds on the cross bolts. And on top, we have the 2 rings locked down to 20 inch-pounds on all 8 of the set screws. So we, of course, always do a double drop test in basically all of our optics tests. So we did, of course, do a double drop test. So we started out with a 6-round control group, just because I happen to have 12 rounds left that day. So we did a 6-round control group at 50 yards with this 14.5 ballistic advantage / superlative arms piston build. And then we did a double drop test, once on the top of the optic from shoulder height and once on the side of the optic from shoulder height. Then we go ahead and do another 6-round group, and very pleasantly surprised that it did exactly 0 shift and 0. The point of impact for both groups was laying on top of each other. There was no discernible difference in impact after the drops. And of course, throughout these 1,000+ rounds that I've been using this optic the last 3 or 4 months, it has been perfectly acceptable, and I've never noticed any sort of shift in impact. So overall, I think for the money, this is probably actually the best value, best budget LPVO on the money. I think if you stack this up dollar for dollar against anything, even the old UTG 1:8s that I still really like, and especially they've been extremely durable as well for me. I've had 3 of them. Those are around the $200 to $225 price tag now. And this one here is, again, today, $150 from PA. This is probably the best value, best budget LPVO on the market. Now it is missing some features, you know. It's lower magnification. It tops out at 4x, so it's not going to be quite as usable, quite as easy to use at longer distances. And it also has the most basic, boring reticle possible. However, inside of 200 yards doesn't matter at all. It's still very fast, very easy. You put that dot on whatever it is that you want to shoot inside of 200 yards, and it's going to happen. So for me, I mean, if I'm on a budget, I only got 150 bucks to throw an optic on a rifle, this is still going to allow me to stretch out, allow me to see targets much better at extended distances than a red dot will, or especially a red dot and magnifier. This is going to be much better than that. It's even lighter. It's only 16 ounces. It's very, very good inside of that 300 yards or so, especially on a 5.56 gun. You can stretch it out further, of course. It's just less easy to do so. So overall, for me, I think the primary arms 1 to 4x, their classic series scope, is excellent when you factor in its price. I mean, if you're looking for an under $200 optic, grab this optic, throw on a decent mount for, you know, 50 to 70 bucks if you can find a decent one, and you're set. Go ahead and slap it on your rifle, zero it, and forget about it. And now for me personally, because my budget has evolved a little bit since when I started the channel, an option like the Viper is still a more attractive option to me. You know, if I had to choose between one of these scopes, of course I'm going to take the Viper every day. But I realize that not everybody is on my budget. In fact, most people are probably above my budget, and there's a good chunk of people that are below looking for those budget options as well. And I'm not the type of guy to look down on someone for choosing the cheaper, more budget option that's more in line with their needs at that given time. For me, if this is all you can afford and really what works the best for you at any given time, the performance is there. It did an exceptional job for me in all of my testing. It passed the double drop test with flying colors, even in a very budget mount. It's very quick, very easy to use inside of 300 yards. You know, it maybe doesn't have the field of view, doesn't have the magnification of other optics, but overall, it does punch above its weight class and above its price point, but again, its price point is very low, which keeps this a very, very attractive optic. But that's about it for me, guys. Hope you all enjoyed. Thank you guys once again for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace off. Die here. All right, we'll try that again.